Hello and welcome to this edition of Press Conference. I'm your host, Jim DeLorenzo, the principal of Jim DeLorenzo Public Relations. You can find me online at jimdelorenzo.com. I have found that my career in public relations is my true vocation, telling the stories of my clients and colleagues in a compelling way to drive sales, membership, and awareness. I've been blessed in that career, and I have many ideas that may be helpful to you. Please feel free to contact me directly, either by email at jim@jhdenterprises.com or by cell phone or text message at 215-266-5943. I would enjoy a conversation with you. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. In my career, I've had the opportunity to meet many interesting people: athletes, entrepreneurs, reporters, coaches, authors, executives, editors, entertainers, and innovators. My guest today is one of many of those, fits in many of those categories. He's the executive director of the Angel Venture Fair, Marc Kramer. Marc is a serial entrepreneur who has started and run more than 20 ventures and written 6 books, and is also the president of Kramer Communications. He has been named an Inc. Magazine Entrepreneur of the Year, a Small Business Journalist of the Year by the Center City Proprietors Association of Philadelphia, has a master's degree in management from Penn State, and a bachelor's degree in journalism from West Virginia. On Thursday, April 30th, the 22nd Annual Angel Venture Fair returns to the Union League of Philadelphia, bringing together entrepreneurs with nearly 400 investors and conduits to investors. And Marc, I'm glad to have you on the show today to talk about some of the projects that you're working on and to talk about the Angel Venture Fair.
Jim, thank you so much for having me, and especially as long as we've known each other. This is a great treat.
It's a great opportunity and a great treat for me as well. When I met you back in the day, we were both in the tech sector.
Yes.
We were working in the Great Valley Corridor.
Yes.
202, Silicon 202, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
And we both were trying to build the businesses that we work with to greater awareness. You were one of the early employees of the Eastern Technology Council, as I recall.
Yeah, I was the very first executive director.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
And that grew to great heights, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s. Mm-hmm. But since then, you've done a lot of different things. And I'd like to catch up with you as far as some of the ventures that we talked about before the show started, some of the things the projects that you're working on right now.
So the projects I had been working on or working on right now? So a few things. One is I run the Angel Venture Fair, which is the largest gathering of angel investors and entrepreneurs in the Mid-Atlantic region. And as you know, we're right now accepting applications for entrepreneurs, and we cover like 15 different industries. And we're one of the biggest in the world at doing what we do. We get companies from 20 to 30 countries a year. We run 8 events during the course of the year. And we even run an event strictly for women. We've now done this 4 years, bringing women together to teach them how to raise capital from investors. We now have an event on IP about how to leverage your intellectual property, have one on social impact. So we cover the gamut of things for people. So that's one of the things I'm working on.
Now, we started working with the Angel Venture Fair in the very beginning, I recall.
Yeah, I started this in 1990. It was called the Pennsylvania Private Investors Group. I ran it the first 5 years. And then over time, as opposed to calling it Pennsylvania, they call it the Private Investors Forum. And then 22 years ago, they started this event. 11 years ago, they asked me to come in and take it back over. Valerie Gatos had been running it. She was an investor, not a marketer. Now Valerie's a state representative, so we're super proud of Valerie. And they asked me to take it over. In 11 years, we went from just 2 events a year to 8 events. We created a national newsletter, and we bring in speakers from all over the world to come in and speak, usually people who have authored a book about angel investing or venture capital, so they can see that the Philadelphia region, Delaware Valley, is a hotbed for technology and other types of companies. The CEO of Evil Genius Beer raised $2.5 million from being a part of it, and now he sits on our board.
Okay. So you've had great successes.
Yes.
And you're bringing in more people, diverse community of people to learn how to be present. You have another venture that you're working with where you help people work on their presentations. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a venture that, because of running the Angel Venture Fair Private Investors Forum, I created pitchtomefirst.com. And so any entrepreneur who's looking to raise capital can send me their PowerPoint presentation, and I'll give them feedback on that. They can send me their business plan. I'll give them written feedback on that. And if they want introductions to investors, and I think that they have a good idea, I will give them introductions, all for a fee for these different things, and that's how I help them. But as soon as I started this, which is about 6 months ago, I started to get 10, 20 companies a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and I enjoy it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really interesting to meet with these entrepreneurs, talk to them, and the clients. I have clients from Saudi Arabia, California, so they're coming from all over the place.
Now, it's interesting because you've seen a lot of presentations over the last 20 years especially.
Yes.
So you've seen what works and what doesn't work. You've seen how people succeed and how they fail.
Yes.
What are some of the common mistakes that people make when they're putting together a presentation for an investor?
Well, I have to say one of the mistakes they make is they don't hire people like you to help them craft their communication, because it's really important. They don't realize they're telling a story.
Right.
And they get caught up in the technical stuff. So it doesn't matter if it's dressmaking or it's software or it's games or whatever. They forget to start out with telling us what the problem is that they're solving, what's the solution, who's the actual market for this. How they plan to market and position themselves, how they plan to sell it, their revenue streams. One of the things they always forget, one of the things they always say is, we don't have any competition. And as soon as you say that, the investors are running for the door because everybody has competition.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I meet people for the first time and they tell me about their business or what they're doing, but they really don't have a story behind it.
Right.
It's just, I do this because this is what I do.
Yes.
And it's not, you don't necessarily get the passion for it. You don't necessarily get the origin story.
That's right.
You know, it's like a superhero comic book. What's the secret origin of Marc Kramer, you know?
Well, people love stories.
Yes.
And people are really interested. And if you tell it like a story and go through all that, and I always say to them, you're forgetting to tell us about how you're going to retain these clients.
Right.
Like, nobody ever has it in their business plan or their PowerPoint presentation. Does that mean you're just going to start from scratch every year, having to get new people to wanting to buy your product or service? So I tell them it's important. And then work with them on their financial projections and making sure that they're detailed and that they can defend their projections. But the most important thing is telling your story, and when you're telling that story, you don't have to tell them. It's just like a first date. You don't have to tell them you're a nut job.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you want them to be interested.
You want to have some mysteries.
Yeah, you want some mysteries. You want them to be interested enough that they say, no matter what you tell me, I'm still going to want to be with you.
Right. That's a great way to describe it, too, because sometimes companies are so, entrepreneurs especially, can be so caught up in their own startup.
Right.
They're putting things together, they're hiring people, they're building something, and they don't really take the time to be able to explain what it is that they're doing so that people are interested in what they're doing.
That's right.
And I think I always described it as, if I could explain to my parents what it was that I could do, then maybe I've got it figured out.
I say the same thing. If my mom can explain in her mahjong game, this is what my son does, then I've done a good job. If my mom said, I have no clue about what Mark is doing, but I know he's making a living, then there's a problem.
Right, because if you can get to the lowest common denominator, if you can get something that is not acronyms and buzzwords, but is actually plain spoken.
I think especially a lot of times engineers and technical people, they think the cool part is the technology,
Right.
and not realizing somebody cares that there's actually a business here, that somebody wants to buy that product or service, and that they will, and it's solving a problem for them, and they'll keep using that product or service. So that's what people care about. And how are you going to make revenue? And by the way, if I'm giving you money to help you grow this business, how do I get my money back, and how do I get a good return, especially a startup company where there's so much risk? I mean, if you're investing in Amazon, right, all the risk has been essentially taken out.
Right.
But if you're investing in a startup that has no clients whatsoever, there's an enormous amount of risk, and so therefore people want to make sure they get a great return for taking the risk.
It's almost a matter of faith, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the great deliverers of faith-based messages is the Bible, the original storytelling.
Yes.
And if you can create your own Bible that tells people what you're all about, all of a sudden you have a compelling notion of what it is that you do and why I would want to do business with you. And you become relatable, and becoming relatable means you're going to stay with them.
I mean, what's the thing that we all say? We always love the story of the entrepreneur, like
Right.
how they came up with the idea, the struggle they went through, and how they came out the other side. I mean, I think that's why people are so attracted to Shark Tank. In a very short period of time, they tell Mr. Wonderful and the others about how they came up with this idea. And people love to hear those stories about how they came up with those ideas.
Absolutely, and that's why it's a compelling show, and that's why people watch it, and people tune in and watch reruns on CNBC and everything else. It's fascinating to me that more people don't realize the power of that story. Storytelling is what I do for a living. It's what you do for a living.
Of course.
And you've been a successful journalist, you've been a successful columnist, freelance writer, and I think those elements of storytelling play such a big deal in convincing people that I want to do business with you. I want to be with you.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, I have a couple ventures I'm working on. So one of them is called consultinguniversityusa.com. And so people said, why'd you start this business? And this business is to teach people between 40 and 60 years old how to start their own part-time or full-time consulting practice. And I said, why? Because how many times have people been let go by corporations and now wondering what's going to happen to me? Wouldn't it be better if you had control of your own financial future?
Exactly.
And the only person can fire you is you by not showing up every day. Because by the time you're 40, you have a lot of expertise built up. And if you are passionate about what you do, you don't have to have great sales skills. All you have to do is show up and start talking to people about what you're doing, and then start employing people like you to help market them out and get them the PR and raise their visibility, and all of a sudden they have that. So, the compelling story there is, I also had been let go at one time and said to myself, I never want that to happen again. Yeah, so that's why you do it. The pitch to me first idea came up because I saw these companies making bad presentations and said they need help, they need feedback before they get in front of the investor, because once you do it,
it's over.
Yeah, it's over. I mean, now I have another one called Funding Organizer, and I was working with different clients on raising money from banks, applying for bank loans. And I found out from applying for it that the bank sends you this PDF form, you fill it out, and then starts the race. Then they start deluging you with emails. And wouldn't it be better if you could just go and they sent you a link and you went online and you filled it all out in one day? So you might spend a Saturday or Sunday
Instead of spending different parts of every day for 2 weeks.
That's right.
Or more.
So when people hear that, I mean, I started a venture on to insure small business bank accounts against cyber theft. And I tell people I was riding in a plane, reading Forbes magazine. I saw this small blurb in Forbes magazine that said, if your business bank account gets hacked and your money is stolen, the bank is not liable. So as soon as I got off the plane, I was going to Mexico to teach entrepreneurship for a week. I immediately called Chris Ennis, the CEO of Meridian Bank, and I said, is this true? Now, back then, people didn't even know this, but this is like 10 years ago. And Chris said, let me check, and said, yeah, you're right. That's true. I'm like, oh my God, I could be wiped out. And there's an opportunity. So I went looking for insurance. Nobody sold it. So I created the first product and got backed by 2 insurance companies. And the insurers, why did they invest? Not just because of the product idea, but they said they loved the story. That's what they liked.
We're going to continue with the stories, behind the stories.
Yes.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Shelter dogs aren't broken. They've simply experienced more life. If they were human, we would call them wise. They would be the ones with tales to tell and stories to write. The ones dealt a bad hand who responded with courage. Do not pity a shelter dog. Adopt one.
Say we've got grit, and we'll take it as a compliment. Because it's our uncommon drive our spark within, that brings us together and sets us apart. We are temple made. And when others take shortcuts, when others take breaks, when others take the easy way, we take charge.
Add us on social media to watch bloopers, behind the scenes footage, previews, and more.
Welcome back to Press Conference on RVM TV. I'm talking with Marc Kramer, the Executive Director of the Angel Venture Fair, which is coming up in April 30th at the Union League of Philadelphia. Tell me a little bit more about what people could expect. Like you're taking applications for people who want to present at the Venture Fair.
Yeah, right now we're taking applications. I said they come from like 20 to 30 countries, 20 to 30 states. They can be anything that's scalable. So the only thing we really don't look at is real estate deals and retail stores.
Okay.
But everything else we're totally open to looking at. And we have a cross-section of angel investors. Typically, your angel investors 50 years and older. I would say 80% of them are white males. Most all of them have owned and started companies themselves. So angel investors are usually very understanding of what you're trying to do.
Right.
And add a lot of value to it, because they're not just putting their money in, they want to help you build the business.
Right.
So they'll help you leverage their contacts, they'll help you bring in other investors if you need them. They're more patient than venture capital people are about when they're going to get their return. They understand all the ups and downs. So that's wonderful. And rarely, in fact, I've never seen this, where the investors ask for 51% of the company. That's always the number one concern of every entrepreneur. Am I going to retain control of my company?
This is my company. It was my idea.
Yeah.
I don't want to sell it at the very beginning.
But the thing they should remember is this, that you'd be better off having a piece of something big than all of something small or non-existent.
That's very true.
So they lose their perspective on it. Because if you take a look at all the great companies, Jeff Bezos does not own 51% of Amazon, or he would own the United States of America. And Bill Gates doesn't own 51%. These guys, that happened long ago when they owned 51%. If you're lucky, it keeps growing, growing, growing. You still are a big shareholder. Your shares are worth a lot of money, and then you can go off and do something else. I mean, look at the guy from WeWorks. He ended up being pushed out, sold, took all his stock, and he walked away with $1.7 billion.
Right.
Fire me any day for $1.7 billion.
That's a nice parachute to go out on.
Yeah, so what we have happen is that we have companies make 10-minute presentations. We have two groups of companies. One are student companies, and we have 10 of them.
Okay.
And they have a booth at the event, and they get to meet the investors. And there are 24 non-student companies that do 10-minute presentations and actually go and meet all the companies because they have a booth. And then we have all the companies do 2 one-minute presentations. And the 1-minute presentation is actually the most popular by the investors. The investors always say, you can get rid of the 10 minutes. I like when they can tell me in 60 seconds or less about who they are and why their company exists. That gets me excited, and that's what will drive me to talking to them.
That's interesting. I think that's a great way to do it, too, because it really makes you work on that message to get it done in a short period of time.
Well, I mean, because of the work that you do, that if you always hear the elevator pitch, right? And it's so true. If you can't tell somebody while you're standing in line at the theater or at a ball game and easily be able to explain to them in 60 seconds or less, because people have short attention spans, who you are and what you do, then you really need to go and keep refining that message until you're able to do that.
Yeah, that's true. And I think 9/10 of the job that I do right now is refining the messaging, refining the story, getting it to its essence so that you can tell it quickly and effectively.
That's right, and with the right information.
Right, because a lot of times you can find, and you can have 2 or 3 different elevator pitches if you need to.
Yes, for different groups.
For different groups, exactly. But you have to be able to be able to recall and work within that framework.
This is one thing I tell the entrepreneurs I work with, and I work with family businesses through a consulting practice called Stress Free Family Business, and I'll go out with them on sales calls. And when you're raising capital, it's just like going out on a sales call. So I always say to them, when you walk into an investor, and just as you're saying that, say, I'd like to know why you agreed to meet with me. What did you like about my idea? And by asking that question, now you're able to customize your pitch to what's their interest is.
Okay.
And most people come in and they start firing away.
Right.
And you have to say enough to start a conversation, but not so much they have no questions to ask.
It's a cluster bombing as opposed to strafing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You got to put a little bit of information here. Again, you want to have an opportunity to engage with somebody. I made that mistake for 20 years. I would give somebody all this information, and I would say, any questions? They say, oh my God, no. You know, like they were overwhelmed.
Yeah, they were overwhelmed.
And my business partner had been the president and CEO of American Express Credit Corp, and after hearing me present, he goes, yeah, everybody knows you're smart and everybody knows you know everything about what you're talking about, but you're not letting them engage you at all. So you've got to hold back a little and allow them to ask you his questions. His name is Walker Tompkins, and he's a brilliant guy. And after that, I said, oh my God, you're totally right about that.
Yeah, because it gives them a chance to engage you in conversation.
That's right.
It gives them a back and forth. All of a sudden you have a dialogue going, and the dialogue leads to further dialogue.
That's right.
If it works correctly, you pique their interest, they pique your interest, you want to continue the conversation.
You're always selling.
Right.
You're selling your product, you're selling your service, you're selling to employees to get them on board, you're selling to investors to get them to put in money, you're selling to vendors to get them to support you at discounted prices so you can get it on. You're selling to your significant other to make sure that they stay the course with you and support you in what you're doing. You're selling to your kids if you have them.
Right.
To say there's going to be a better life down the road here, and yes, I will have time for you. So you're in constant sell mode the whole time, and each time you've got to tell that story in a certain way for each group so each of them appreciates what you're doing.
That's very true. And you've got to be able to consider all your different audiences and all the different people that you encounter. You have to be ready at all times. I jokingly, but it's very true now, you're on camera all the time.
Yes.
Whether you like it or not, whether
For
you
sure.
realize it or not, wherever you go, wherever you are, you're on camera.
Yes.
So if you can present yourself at your best all the time, and you prepare yourselves to be at your best at all times, then that next part about telling your story comes a lot easier because you're on your toes. You're ready to go.
You're right about always being on camera all the time. You have to be thinking what that image is that you're projecting.
Exactly.
I mean, take a look what the Pope did. If you remember, he smacked that woman's hand, right? And so that's an image that on a global basis, everybody will remember.
And the day he did that, he had just delivered an address about violence towards women.
Yeah. Blew it out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, that message got completely lost with the message of him slapping that woman's hand.
Yeah.
And there are so many interesting things. You see that all the time. And, I watched the Academy Awards last night. And it just struck me as so funny because people who know they're going to be on camera, they just seem like they're completely unaware.
Oh, yeah.
They're completely unaware that people are going to be looking at them. No matter how many times that they're on TV, how many times they're in the movies, they seem like they're caught off guard.
Yes.
And that whole room is basically a studio.
Right. That's totally right. It is totally a studio. And as you know, the next day, like today, ABC is actually doing shows from there.
They're going to be critiquing you all week now.
Yeah, of course, of course.
And I think that enough people don't realize that that's going to happen, that we still have these gaps in our, another perfect example is Joe Biden using the quote from a John Wayne movie to counter a question from a young woman, a young college student. That just looks so wrong. And does he expect this 22-year-old woman to know a reference to a John Wayne movie from like 60 years ago, 70 years ago?
Well, and that shows you, unfortunately for him at that moment in time, that he was showing he was out of touch.
Right.
And that sent a message on its own by using that as an example.
Right.
So you have to think again, he wasn't thinking about the audience, who he was presenting to, or he would have given a better example for that particular person.
Exactly, exactly. So you have to, you look at your political candidates, you look at your, I always tell my clients, one of the best ways to prepare for any media interview or any appearance is to watch other people's media interviews and appearances.
Yes.
You know, I think as far as guests go, I don't look to CNN and MSNBC as places for people to get training on how to speak, because
the worst places.
They seem to be all just confrontational and argumentative, but
overtrained.
right. But Fox Business or CNBC,
Yeah.
You can do a little bit more research into how people present and see what really works.
Yes.
And even that guy a couple years ago who had his daughter come into his interview while he was doing the Skype.
Oh, yes, right.
He handled it well.
Yeah.
He handled the disruption and the interruption well. He didn't chastise the kid.
Right.
Or he didn't lose control of the interview. He just kind of worked it in. And that made it much more interesting, because you think, oh, this guy's pretty cool.
For those of us who have kids, this happens.
Right.
This happened to me with a big client of mine, my marketing practice, where we're having this conference call just like that one, and my daughter jumped on me and said, I want snacks now. And they were like, okay. And so the guy said, I have my grandfather. Please, let's just take a few-minute break
Right.
and do that.
You knew your audience.
Yeah, exactly right.
Excuse me. So tell me more about the venture fair.
So the people who have applied to the Angel Venture Fair, and mind you, we've been doing 22 years, over 93% of those companies end up getting a second meeting with investors. Now,
Great.
we can't control what the outcome is going to
Right.
be, because people always ask us, what's the outcome? But I would say out of the 34 companies that present, over the 11 years I've been running it, over 10% of them have gotten investment. And when you consider that 0.2% get investment overall, 10% getting investment is pretty significant.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, so it's a great batting average for us. But when people ask me, I said, listen, all 34 companies might get offers and they all turn them down. We look bad. All 34 companies might have accepted the offers, and they might be, oh my God, this place must be instant money.
Right.
And that's not true either. So it's like anything else. What we try to do is put them in the best possible position to meet the right investors, tell their story, and hopefully get a second meeting that will lead to investment.
How would people get in touch with you about the venture fair, Angel Venture Fair, and how would they get in touch with you about some of your other businesses?
So the Angel Venture Fair, it's really simple, www.angelventurefair.com and mkramer@angelventurefair.com. And frankly, if you look my name up, Marc Kramer, there's a lot of stuff on
There's
the
a lot
internet.
of material. Just Google it.
So you'll be able to connect with me. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I accept everybody. I've almost 8,000 contacts on LinkedIn. So I accept everybody on LinkedIn. And that's because everybody has an interesting story to tell. And sometimes, even though I might not need their service, because most people who are on LinkedIn are trying to sell you their service,
Right.
Occasionally I say to them, I may have somebody who could utilize your service. And they're always kind of shocked when I say that. I'd say, oh, I can't use it,
Right.
but I actually have somebody who I think would be good. Just send me your email address and I'll look to make the connection for you.
Isn't that a great way to do it? It really is a great way to connect with people.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And I think we should always be trying to help other people. I mean, I think anytime you're networking, you should always be offering, how can I be helpful to you? And I always say that to people, and if I can, they're always surprised. Like, I might not help them immediately, but I might call them like months later
Right.
and say, oh, I've got somebody for you. And they're like, you actually remembered. Yes.
Isn't that the neatest thing?
Yeah, yeah.
It really is. Well, thank you, Mark, for being my guest today. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me.
And I'd like to have you back another day
I
to
hope
talk
you will.
about some more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And I thank you for watching us today. I look forward to seeing you all again here very, very soon. I'd like to hear your story. I'd like to, if you would give me a call, 215-266-5943, or drop me an email, jim@jhdenterprises.com. Remember, everyone has a story, but not everyone knows how to tell it. I want to hear your story. Thank you for watching.